Okay, today we are doing lesson 7.1, day 1, where we are going to use the Pythagorean theorem to find the unknown side lengths. So first you need to know that the Pythagorean theorem says that the square of the length of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the two legs. And in order to know what that's talking about, we are talking about a right triangle. And the side opposite the right angle, so the side across from it, is your hypotenuse. The other ones are called legs. So this is telling you that the hypotenuse, so we take a leg squared plus the leg squared is equal to the hypotenuse squared. For whatever reason, every textbook always uses a leg is A, which that's A squared, plus B squared, and they always label the hypotenuse as C. So it's C squared. So normally in textbooks you'll see it as one leg is A, one leg is B, it doesn't matter which one, and the hypotenuse is always labeled as C. So the Pythagorean theorem is given to you as A squared plus B squared equals C squared. The leg here, it says, is the two shorter sides, and the hypotenuse is always the longest side. So we're going to use this Pythagorean theorem to solve some problems. So our first example here wants us to find the length of this side street, and it is giving us the two leg measurements. So if I look here, the first thing I would always do is I'd mark the hypotenuse and the two legs. So my hypotenuse is across from the 90-degree angle, so that's C, and AB, remember, are interchangeable. I'm just going to label it like this. So to set up the Pythagorean theorem, A squared is 10 squared plus B squared, which is 7.5 squared, and that is going to equal C squared. If I put this in my calculator, 10 squared plus 7.5 squared is 156.25. That's equal to C squared. Well, I just want to know the length of C, so the opposite of squaring something is to take the square root. So I have to take the square root of 156.25. So this gives me that C equals 12.5. The distance, and it's measured in kilometers. You need to complete guided practice number 1, and it is from page number 9 in your book. Example number 2, again I would label your A, B, and C. So hypotenuse is always across from the 90 and is C. Here's my A and here's my B. So A is x, so we have x squared plus B, which I labeled as 15 squared, is equal to C squared, which is 17 squared. So unlike last time, this time it is a leg that is missing. You could calculate each of these individually and then subtract them, or you can just subtract it.
Brandon Worth, your ride is waiting outside.
Sorry about that. So here we go. X squared is equal to 17 squared minus 15 squared, which is 64. The opposite of squaring something is to take the square root, and we end up with x equals the square root of 64 is 8. And this doesn't have units, so we can just leave it as 8 units. And then I would look to see if it makes sense. Does it make sense that this is 8? Well, if I look here, I know it has to be smaller than 17. So yes, 8 is smaller than 17, so it can be correct. Here's your second guided practice 1 to complete. So pause it and go ahead and complete it. Our example number 2, we're getting a little bit more complex here. It wants us to find two different parts here. The first part that it wants us to find is this part right here. So let me highlight the leg that this part it wants me to find. Well, if I use the right triangle that includes it, it is right here. So I'm going to label it. This is C because it's across from the 90, and I have A and B. So I would do 18 squared plus 13.5 squared, oops, that's not very good, is equal to C squared. When I calculate that out, that gives me 506.25 is equal to C. 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 C So then I get C, and it is going to equal 22.5. If I look there, since that's my C and that's in inches, it should be the longest side, and it is 18, 13.5, and then I have the 22.5. So that is correct. So I'm going to erase this part up here, and I'm going to mark that in there. So now I know that this is 22.5. The other side that's missing is this side right here. So I have to include this in a right triangle in order to solve. So the right triangle is this large triangle here. Well, if I notice my side lengths, I have A, B, across from the 90 is C. So to do this, I have A is 18 squared plus B. I don't know the total length of B. I only know this part. So that doesn't help me because the total length of B goes from clear to X to Z. So that's my unknown. So I leave it as B squared is equal to C squared of 35 squared. So in order to do this, I would subtract the 18 squared. 35 squared minus 18 squared gives me 901. The opposite of squaring something is to take the square root. So I end up with B, and it's going to be a rounded answer, so I'm going to use my approximate symbol. So B here would be approximately 30 inches. Well, remember up here, I was looking for the distance from Y to Z. So that means if this total length is 30, I would do 30 minus 13.5, which would be 16.5. So my two answers here are 16.5 and 22.5. Okay, for your guided practice here, you are going to solve for Y, so this entire length here, and you're going to solve for X, which is just the length from A to C. So you'll have two separate problems in order to calculate that out. Our next problem is very similar to the one we just had. If we look here, it says we're finding X. Well, if I look there, here is my right triangle that involves the X. I don't know the X side length, and I don't know this side length, so I have to calculate something before I can do that. So what I need to do is I need to find a different right triangle. So if I use the big right triangle, I will be able to find this missing piece right here to help me out. So basically I'm trying to find this. Well, across from my 90 is my C. I have A. I need to find B because B would be my total length here. So A squared is 12 squared plus B squared equals 20 squared. So I had minus 12 squared from both sides. So 20 squared minus 12 squared would be 256. The opposite of squaring something is to take the square root. And I'm left with B equals 16. So I know the total length here is 16. Well, all I care about is this part from here to here. So 16 minus 7 gives me 9. So the part that I care about is that this from here to here was 9. Okay? So now I can use that to help me solve for X. Now here's my new right triangle that I'm going to focus on. Across from the 90 is my C, so that's what I'm looking for. And we have A and B. So I have 12 squared plus 9 squared equals C squared. 12 squared plus 9 squared is 225 equals C squared. The opposite of squaring is to take the square root. And we end up with C equals 15 centimeters. So my answer here is 15 centimeters. X equals 15 centimeters. You need to go ahead now and solve guided practice over here, number 4, and you are trying to find Y, it said. For your summary, that is your assignment. So you already have the guided practices you need to complete. Your assignment then for this part is page 16 and 17, and it's numbers 1 through 10.